Welcome to the Anxiety Connection. If you've ever struggled with anxiety and are ready to finally get some answers, you've come to the right place. Hi, my name is Wendy Leeds, and I've suffered with anxiety my entire life. Thankfully, I'm also a psychotherapist, and over the years, I've learned a lot about anxiety, where it comes from, and how to manage it. That's what this podcast is all about. So, let's grab a cup of tea and talk about it. I have such a special podcast for you today. Not only is this my 10th podcast, can't believe it, but I am really excited and just a little nervous about doing my very first podcast interview. And today I feel so lucky to be able to talk with a really successful businesswoman. She owns her own small business. She's a mom and a grandmom. And today, this lovely woman is stepping up, and I would say very bravely, to share with us her personal story about something she's been keeping secret her whole life. You know, these days we talk about everything on social media. There seem to be no secrets anymore, but in truth, there are some things we still keep private and things we really don't want to share. And today we're going to talk about one of those things. We're going to start a really important conversation about something that a lot of people find hard to share. So let me introduce the owner of Sage and Savvy Marketing, Lucille Fisher. And let me say welcome, Lucille. I am so glad and so honored that you're joining us here today on the Anxiety Connection and that we get to have this really important conversation. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm so excited that you agree. Well, actually, let's get right to it. How did we get to this place, Lucille?
Well, an interesting story is that you and I live across the street from each other.
Yes.
And when you started this podcast, of course, I thought to myself, this is awesome. You know, Wendy has her, she's a psychotherapist. She's doing this anxiety connection to help people. And I started to listen. What surprised me was when you shared your own story about struggling with anxiety. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is my story. And I couldn't have been more thankful. Just grateful and thankful that you were sharing this out in the world, because I think it's important for people to hear. Mm-hmm. And and I could relate to everything that you were saying. And I thought to myself, it's time that I also shared my own story. I think that, people who know me might be surprised to hear that anxiety has been a big part of my life.
I was.
Because people will always say, oh, you're so confident, you've got it all together. And I think what you do is over time, you just perfect that persona. And not that it's not, in some ways the real truth, mm-hmm. but that you also perfect it because it's not acceptable to have anxiety.
That's right. We're not perfect. And for me, that's an issue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I have a big perfectionist streak.
Yes.
Of course. And I think that certainly feeds into anxiety. Do you know what I mean?
I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
We need to be perfect so people won't know that inside we're anxious. We're suffering.
Right.
We're suffering. So when did you know you were anxious? Do you remember a time?
Well, I would say I probably have been anxious, had some, anxiety my whole life. My mom struggled terribly with anxiety, and she also struggled with depression.
Yes.
So I watched that, as well as some of my older siblings. I'm the fourth of 5 children.
Right.
Had a lot of anxiety issues. for my oldest sister, it was combined with some sexual abuse by a family member.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And actually, yeah. So anyway, not really a family member. Yeah. Anyway, it's complicated.
Right. Yeah.
We considered this person, this guy to be
Someone trusted.
Someone we trusted.
Which is, it makes the abuse so much, it's just awful.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yes. And she was 12 years older than me. So I witnessed a lot of chaos, a lot of upset in my family, but which certainly affected me,
right,
as a child.
Yes.
But I do remember as a child feeling almost this out of body and feeling, and mostly when it was bedtime.
Oh, that's interesting. What
Yeah.
do you think that it was about that bedtime?
I think it was about getting quiet.
And
having that anxiety. You can't, you can't mask it.
You can't be busy or talk around it. Yes.
Right. Yes. Or be busy or play, whatever.
Right.
And I think that I do believe that anxiety is having anxiety. Some of us are predisposed. We are predisposed to anxiety.
I agree.
So it's a body thing. Yes. I've said this many, many times before, that anxiety is like having diabetes. It's like having any other medical condition. There's nothing different than that. So I think that it was just that time of day,
right,
when I could feel I got still enough to feel my body's reaction to maybe what was going on that day.
Right.
And I didn't know what to call it. I just knew I felt weird.
I identify. So what did you do as a girl? Did you talk about it? How did you handle it?
I guess, well, I did I would say to my mother, geez, I feel strange, or whatever, right. At nighttime, yes. And I'd go into her room and I'd say, geez, Mom, I feel, and of course my mother had this thing. So she would just say, oh, it's nothing or whatever. You know what I mean? It was my mother, having struggled with anxiety and depression and always being terribly ashamed.
Right.
At that point, in the 60s and 70s, whenever,
right.
That she did struggle with anxiety and depression, felt that I think she really believed that if any of us struggled, it was her fault.
Oh, yes. Yes. She had failed.
And she had watched, my brother and my sister go through some very difficult times, and which is exacerbated by the fact that, she herself wasn't in a position to help or protect or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And, so she felt that it's like, no, that's not happening to you.
Anxiety is, for some people, it shows weakness.
Exactly. And that was my connection.
Yeah.
As soon as I got old enough to understand that, yes, it was anxiety, to me, it was, I am weak. I have a flaw.
Right. And it must be covered up because no one else has it, because no one else talks about it. It is, you can live across the street from someone for several decades and not have a conversation from the heart about how you really feel. And that's a shame.
Yes, it is terribly awful. And yeah, so that was my underlying premise was it is a flaw. It is a weakness. Yeah. Now I learned better. I learned that it was not, you know what I mean? Because, it evolves, right? So then
we'll talk about the process, about the evolution.
Yeah. So, from that, I think I can probably identify my first anxiety attacks when maybe I was a teenager, which makes sense, too, because hormones come into play.
That's right.
And
make a difference.
And they make a difference.
Yes.
So, I can identify that. And again, I blamed it on the fact the people around me were, weak. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's, and like I said, it wasn't talked about. I had, my dad was funny. And my family really was filled with a lot of love. There's definitely a tremendous amount of love. And my mother was a wonderful, caring, sensitive, and my father was too. Sensitive person, but in those days you don't talk about these things. And my father, God forbid we ever had an argument, which would happen and often, whatever, and like in any family, he'd be running around the house shutting all the windows because he didn't want.
You don't let this secret out.
No, and you don't. No, we're perfect.
And I think it's almost like that today. You just put on your big girl pants and go out and pretend everything's good.
That's it. We were an Italian American family, and my gosh, a lot of emotion, and it was like, no, you keep it, any angst, keep that in the family,
right? Shh. Yes.
Don't talk about it. So, and the way I dealt with it as a teenager was to be perfect, to be the perfect student.
Excellent.
To be the perfect daughter.
Of course.
To be strong.
Yes.
At least to project the image that I was strong. I could handle anything. Well, I couldn't. I was a teenager. There was all this chaos going on around me. But I did well in school, and that was my way of coping. I was going to be the perfect, because my older siblings and my sister Anne Marie, who was just 5 years older than me, had epilepsy. So, it was like my older siblings all had something else going on and they were dealing with. So I was going to be the one that would be perfect.
And what was going on the inside? As on the outside, everyone believed Lucille is perfect.
Yeah,
I believe
that I could handle anything.
Yes.
That I could handle anything. My mother, I swear it was my mother's, she would tell me like everything. I was like the priest in confession.
Right.
But it was just, I think, a struggle. I think it was hard. And so, like I said, I think I experienced my first really severe anxiety attacks in high school.
Right.
And at that time, it wasn't, like I said, there wasn't that family support of, God forbid, Jerry, my sister, who was 12 years older and had experienced sexual abuse as a child, had a lot of therapy.
Yes.
And my mother, oh my God, the shame. And the thing is, they didn't really acknowledge that sexual abuse was any part of her mental illness. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. It was not acknowledged. And God, I could tell you, it was just crazy. There was all sorts of rationalization for, issues. And so it was like, oh my God, you don't want to be like that. She's crazy.
And you don't want to be crazy too.
Oh no. Are you kidding me?
Oh.
But, she, in her behavior, it was just classic, Wendy. It was just classic. Her behavior was just classic because it was something that was ignored in the family. And anyway, so poor woman never really got any acknowledgement.
Right.
And so I feel terrible about that. She passed away when she was 47.
Wow.
From an overdose. But we don't know if it was intended, if it wasn't, but many times before that she was in the hospital.
So life was tough.
Life was tough.
Yeah.
Life was tough. So, God, I didn't want any association with any of that.
Yeah. So how did you get from there to where you are today?
Okay. So my father got cancer when I was in college.
Right.
Okay. And at that point, I had been driving my mother and my sister into Boston for 3 months.
There you are again, taking care
Yeah. And I'm like 21, right?
Wow.
So driving in and out, I was I acted as a spokesperson. My brother was pretty good too, but he, in the family, anyway, took on a lot of responsibility. And then after he came home 3 months later, I was driving into college on Route 128.
Which is a terrible road if you don't live in the area. Yes.
So I'm driving in the same way. The funny thing, it was the same way you would go to the hospital.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting, isn't it? Yep.
Yes. And I had a total meltdown. Total severe anxiety attack. I thought I am going.
What was it like? Could you breathe?
Well, I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to pass out, and I'm in a car driving. So I thought, oh my God, I'm going to pass out. I'm going to get in a car accident. I'm going to die. Yeah. The whole 9 yards.
Right.
And just absolutely terrified.
Yes.
Terrified. And I made it to school that day. Of course, I couldn't concentrate on anything.
Yes.
And then miraculously, I got back in that car and made it home.
Well, I admire that.
I know. And it was not easy.
Yeah.
So it was not easy. So at that point, it was really like, I need some help here, And so I did seek some help. But, in discussions with my mother, she was like, oh, you don't need that, Lucille. You don't need, you don't need this. You don't need that. You're fine. You're fine.
Yes.
You'll get over this.
Yes.
And I have
Suck it up.
Suck it up.
Yes.
You're going to be okay. Because God forbid another one of her children.
Right. Right.
And I was the perfect one. God forbid,
right.
Something I fail. And that was my interpretation. Right. And so she was like, you don't need the help. You don't need the help. And I kind of just sucked it up. And then when my father did pass away, and so I kind of just struggled with that. Oh, it was really terrible.
Yeah.
Really.
I'm so sorry.
It was really very, very difficult. And I was in my senior year. So, all that goes with being going out into the world and so
grief,
all of that.
And anxiety. That was a tough year.
That was a very tough year.
Yeah.
So after my dad died, he did remarkably well for 2.5 years. It was a very rare form of cancer. And he was a miracle man that he lived 2.5 years. And so, we all helped, and he was able to be at home, and that was fabulous. He was able to die at home, which is wonderful. Yeah. And after my father died, I was in graduate school. So right. It was my second trimester. I guess it was so I was at Northeastern getting my master's degree.
Right.
And again, I just fell apart.
Yes.
And finally it was like, I'm done.
Right.
I'm done with this. I'm not going to live my life like this.
Was there a moment that you decided, or was it just one thing after the other that finally built up? What brought you to that?
I think it was, well, I know exactly what it was. It's funny. I wasn't engaged at the time.
Right.
I did not have children, but the thought came into my mind, I am not going to pass this on to my children.
I love that.
Yes. It was like, this is not going to happen. Yes. I am going to break the cycle, and I am going to deal with this. I guess it was an awareness that nothing at that point, really, there was nothing wrong with me inherently.
Exactly. And what would you say to someone who's had the panic attack, who's suffering, who's like both of us had a lifetime? Where do you find that moment, that courage? What would you say to them right now?
Well, I would say to them, do not suffer. Because
Yay.
what I did is I toughed it out for God. I swear 5 years, or, it was a long time that I wasted. That's the way I look at it. I look at it that I wasted that time.
Well, you certainly suffered in that time.
Because I suffered.
Yes.
So this was like, I am done. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to continue this. And, you get old. I was, probably 23 then. And 23, 24, and I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm not going to do this. And I got the psychiatrist that I had talked to before, who said to me earlier. So he was like, he had said, so I went to him and he was like, this is so common.
Don't you love that word?
Oh my God. He said, it was such a relief. He said, for women, in their late teens, early 20s, that's when it usually hits.
And women are twice as likely to be diagnosed with anxiety, 2 times more likely. So women with hormones, pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, no matter what age, 23, 53, 93, if you're suffering, please listen to Lucille. This is your moment.
Really, because it was, like I said, I put myself through so much pain that was unnecessary. So at that point, I started therapy. He prescribed medicine that helped me tremendously. And I say whatever works for you. Yes,
I agree. I agree.
If medicine is the answer, then that's the way you go. You know what I mean? Yes. So, so I have spent years in therapy just trying to figure out, the whole, the underpinnings of growing up in a chaotic home. I know my parents did the best they could do, but a house that the anxiety was the underlying issue. Was big in depression, and it was a major theme. Let's put it that way.
Exactly. So therapy works for you.
And therapy.
What else are you doing to handle your anxiety?
Okay. So then it's so funny because I'm just saying that. So my father dies and then I go to therapy, right?
Right.
And then, so I took all sorts of classes, how to manage your stress, over time, all that. I would take courses, and I found exercise was huge. So I exercise.
Like what kind of exercise are you doing?
At that time it was aerobic exercise.
Sure. But walking,
love to walk, but it was aerobic because, after my son was born, I did have a postpartum depression, and
exercise is great for that too.
It was great. It was a lifesaver for me. Go
for a walk. Walk away. Yes.
Yeah. And it was also music soothes me. So this was an aerobic class, and between the music, I would sob in the back row. I would be exercising and sobbing in the back row, but I mean, a good sobbing,
Yes, a cleansing sob.
A cleansing sobbing. Awesome. It was like, because I was feeling, you start to feel better, and it was a total cleansing sob.
Yes.
So then my mother passed away in my 40s.
Right.
I started meditating.
Aha. Okay.
And meditation has been a huge part of my life. It has been my anchor. So, I learned, we're very blessed here in Medfield. There's a lot of wonderful, holistic healing practitioners. And I'm lucky to call several of them my friends. And so I got into this. There's a retreat center in Western Massachusetts called Spirit Fire, and they teach the practice of living awareness meditation.
Wonderful.
And I learned that. I actually did a year-long class called The Spiritual Path. And I've always been fascinated by religion and, in my 20s,
the spiritual side of things.
Very spiritual.
Yes.
Very spiritual. But you know what? I'm not into institutionalized religion.
Doesn't matter. Wherever your heart is called.
I absolutely agree.
Lucille, I'm going to have to ask you this because if anybody who's listening to this podcast knows, meditation doesn't really, I struggle with meditation. My meditation goes, breathe in, breathe out. I need to go to the store. What day is it? Squirrel. I would love if you could share some ideas. How do you make meditation work for you? I could use some pointers.
Well, first of all, that squirrel mind is absolutely normal.
Thank you.
And everybody experiences that when they're first starting to learn how to meditate.
Right.
It is a practice. So you basically just acknowledge all these thoughts that are going through your mind and say, that's okay. You know what I mean? It's fine.
Okay.
And so the way that I learned meditation, keep focusing on your breath.
All right, I can do that.
So in other words, so what you would do is you're breathing inward.
Okay, I'm doing it with you.
And then out.
Okay. And you just keep your focus.
And you keep your focus on your breath and on the air going through your nose.
Yeah, it feels a little cool when it comes in.
Right. So you're actually focusing on your nose.
Okay, I can do that.
Yes. So then your other thoughts are just thoughts.
Right.
And you will find the more you practice, the more those other thoughts leave you.
Okay. All right.
And I must say, the practice of living awareness is actually, they have free meditations on their website. So,
awesome.
It is. It's really amazing. But you can start with 5 minutes and then go, do 5 minutes.
Right.
It's about getting still and feeling your body. It's feeling, getting, and relaxing your body, because it can honestly, for me, I can, I get very, very busy, and that really feeds into anxiety.
And do you feel like the anxiety is in your body?
Yeah.
And when you do this stilling of the body, everything sort of relaxes your brain.
It's a total change.
Uh-oh, you may have changed my mind, Lucille. You may have a convert here.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it is it just flips a switch. So I'm running around. I can feel it. I can feel that I'm getting myself all worked up or whatever. And I will stop and I will sit quietly for whatever it takes, 10, 15 minutes. I wish I knew this a long time ago.
Right. Because
pulling back and really keying into your body and the cues your body is giving you is important. And the breathing and the deep breathing and you want the exhale to be longer than the inhale, because that kicks off your parasympathetic.
Right, that's that relaxation response.
Relaxation response.
As opposed to the pedal. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And then I can go back and feel good and feel centered,
Excellent. So meditation, breathing, music, exercise, therapy.
My gardening. I love
gardening.
Just being in nature, love, the sound of the ocean. But my garden, I love to work in my garden. I'm a tree hugger. So
good.
I feel I need grounding. I really feel that people who deal with anxiety, usually and depression, are usually very sensitive people.
We are the loveliest, strongest, most wonderful people on the planet.
Really, honestly, I think it's a factor. And I think it's just that same sensitivity which makes us empathetic.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So there's two sides to this, Wendy.
I've always
There's
said
nothing wrong with us. We really are, and I hate to use the word perfect, but we really are perfect just the way we are.
And I think we're more courageous because if you have anxiety, sometimes just getting out of bed in the morning, act of courage.
Yes. Yeah. But, I am thankful. So I am grateful at this stage in my life. I'm 62 years old, and I'm grateful that I am this sensitive person. I am this empathetic person. And I really don't think you can separate the two.
I agree that there is a beautiful side to people with anxiety, and we need to embrace that.
Yeah, and I think it's people who are sensitive.
Yes.
And I think that anxiety can come with that.
Yeah. So
because we don't know how to regulate.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
We don't know how to regulate our bodies. And
that comes with meditation, right? That's sort of where
that comes with meditation. And like I said, and understanding your thought process, understanding, those negative thoughts that you're having. So like I said, I highly recommend going to a psychotherapist like yourself because
me too.
I've been talk it out.
Got to talk it out. So little bit of time left. I have two important questions. First of all, and you can answer any way you want.
Right.
Tell me about how this has affected your children, and then any advice you would like to share. But because you have such wisdom, I would love for you to reach out to the people listening and give them, your best wisdom.
Okay. So I think for my children, I from when they were very small, talk to them about anxiety.
Yes.
And I would say to them, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling nervous, let's talk about it.
Right.
So when they were anxious, they would come to me. So, and of course, again, it's more when particularly when the teenage years can be difficult, but I'm thinking of my daughter because even, just different times, they knew they could come to me and we talked about it. And what I said to them was, that's perfectly normal.
I love that. For mothers everywhere, that's perfectly normal.
Instead of, oh my God, no, you're fine. No, you're okay. Because I would sense my own mother's anxiety. And then it makes it 3 times worse.
Yes.
So therefore, I would say perfectly normal. Let's talk about it. And so my kids have always had a way to cope. They learned early, this is normal.
Yeah.
And if you get to a point that you need help, that is a sign of strength.
Love that.
It is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. Yes. When you realize you need help, to ask for it.
Yes.
Is being strong.
And you're strong for breaking the cycle.
And that's the thing for me, Wendy. It's like, break the cycle.
And you did.
I did. I broke the cycle. And, I guess I would just want people to know that there is nothing wrong with them.
No.
That to have anxiety is not, depression is not a fatal flaw.
No, it's not.
It is not a fatal flaw, and that there are solutions and there's help out there, and to seek it out and don't suffer in silence.
Please, if you take nothing from this podcast today, Lucille and I both urge you, if you have been suffering like we have for many years, this is your moment to reach out, call for help, call a friend. This is the moment to take action. No more suffering, please.
No more suffering. No more suffering.
So, Lucille, this has been fabulous. If people would like to get in touch, would you give us some of your contact information? And of course, we'll include all this in the show notes, but go ahead, Lucille. Where can they get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me at Lucille. My email is lucille@Sage and Savvy Marketing. My website, www.sageandsavvymarketing.com. And on there, you're going to see all the social media, because I'm a digital marketer, all my social media sites that I'm on, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. So I'm there. The one thing I didn't mention, can I mention one thing?
Oh, please, please,
Okay.
please.
So what I didn't mention is I just wanted to mention all the famous people now that are coming out right now.
Oh, okay. We're not alone. Go ahead.
We're not alone. And acknowledging that they're struggling with, they've struggled with anxiety and depression, like Bruce Springsteen and Beyonce and Adele and Whoopi Goldberg.
Really?
And Dr. Oz.
Wow.
And Dan Harris, who's a journalist, a broadcaster on ABC, who had an absolute huge anxiety attack on the air. And then he wrote a book which is 10% happier because he found meditation to be incredibly healing for him.
That's it. The theme of the show is.
I just want to mention that. And then also one other thing.
Yes.
And that is that a great friend of mine and a very wise woman who is an expert in trauma and neurobiology has said to me in the past, helping is healing.
What wise words. They can change a life.
Yeah.
Oh, Lucille, this has been such an honor. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I think that's it.
Okay, so it's Lucille at Sage and Savvy Marketing. Check the show notes.
Yep, sageandsavvymarketing.com. And like I said, I have all they can email me, they can direct message me, private message me. Happy to hear, from anyone.
And we'll look for
if I can help.
And let this be your moment to make a change in your life. Thank you, Lucille. Thanks so much to you for being a part of the Anxiety Connection. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe. And until we're together again, I wish you peace, joy, and love.